and let us all do we can to build a better future.
Moving on, some stuff about something going on with journalism right now. I just wanted to first of all draw people's attention to what I consider to be a fantastic article in E&P, which is a professional media publication, but they're talking about diversity, and this guy named Andrew Ramsamy points out that while it's very important to have diverse voices in media and journalism, it is also important to have other types of diversity. One of the things he points out is that many media companies fail or are failing or can't afford to pay their journalists enough because there's no business sense. Mm-hmm. And what he's pointing out is that there's an absolute necessity for media companies at every level to bring people in who know how to run businesses.
I want to add in something here real quick. It's relating to a story that I've talked about when Daniel and I were doing field work in 2017. We covered the Exoneration Project, where 16 Black men were exonerated for crimes that they did not commit because of the corruption of 4 Chicago police officers. When everything was said and done, when all the video recording and audio recording and interviews were done, Daniel and I, again, this was in 2017, leaving the building, we were both shocked at the amount of corruption. And we were in an elevator with a couple other news reporters from the local media outlets. And to be clear here, all of them were Caucasian. The main field reporters there were wearing very fancy suits, looking all dressed up. And their conversation wasn't about how 16 Black men were framed for crimes they didn't commit. The conversation Daniel and I heard was, hey, how much you guys are getting paid? Have you heard that they're talking about lowering our salary, that they're cutting off our hours? They're wanting us to work more. They're lowering the pay. That's what they were talking about in that elevator. And these guys looked far more put together and looked the part. I also want to bring up another thing here too, because we've done reports on how media outlets, not only at the corporate level, like the larger flagships that we know, like Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC, but they've been cutting back on funding for journalism and cutting back pay and cutting down staff. It's interesting that we're having this conversation, because the thing is, you have these multi-billion-dollar corporations that are doing this. And they're systematically creating an environment to where it is impossible truly to have, I think, diversity in a media landscape that's controlled by these corporations, because these corporations only care about profit. And if they can cut corners or pay people less, they're going to do it. I also want to bring up a point to where I think it was in 2021, perhaps, where Mayor Lori Lightfoot, the wonderful mayor of Chicago, decided to make a statement. She wanted to see media outlets hire more women, people of color. And the thing is, I agree with what Lightfoot said, okay? But my question and my pushback then to Lightfoot is, okay, many of these corporations can't really do that. They could if they wanted to, but the whole bottom line is to earn profit. The sad fact is they can't. And you have an environment now to where the media isn't really reaching out to Latino communities, African-American communities. They're not reaching out to the Asian community. They're not reaching out to people. And I would say then to Lightfoot, especially, I'm just going to use her for an example. Hey, if you want to see more diversity, Mayor Lightfoot, do you want to put more funding into schools on the South and West Side for media training to maybe get people, young people, the next generation, to be involved more in social media or journalism? Because we do need diversity, but there is a lack of programs. There's a lack of resources to really reach out to, again, diverse communities, because these corporations aren't going to do it. The corporations want to earn profit. And like I said, they'll pay top dollar to have diversity with their pundits, but their pundits aren't going to go out there in the field. A lot of these pundits aren't going to really do all the major work that we're, I guess, maybe used to seeing way back before the Clintons decided to make the Telecom Act come to existence. This is rather disheartening, and this is where I have to say, at the end of the day, if we truly want to see diversity in the media landscape, don't expect it from the corporate media outlets. They're not going to do that. it's going to have to be done by ourselves. And that's easier said than done, especially when you have millions of Americans struggling just to put food on the table. Um, it's really difficult to do like a home setup system or get your own studio. It's there's a lot of walls that are preventing said diversity from happening. And I just want to bring this up because I know there's a little bit more you want to add to the story. But take, for example, Jamal Green, who is running for mayor of Chicago, way before he made his announcement, he had a woman reporter and a black woman and a black man who were asking questions to Lightfoot, questions that she wasn't used to because she's used to corporate media questions, and they were challenging her. What did she do? She dismissed that. So in other words, there's one politician right now that's, again, I'm using it as an example, as a hypocrite. So, she wants diversity, but when people start challenging her, she decided to dismiss it and walk away.
Well, I mean, I think that's all very, that's important stuff. But I want to point out that in this article, Andrew Ramsamy points out that he's noticing very few people who in the industry anymore who are actually media or news business professionals who actually understand the business side of things and can actually help, whether you're talking about a corporate media organization or something more local or even a not-for-profit. He's talking about the fact that people don't know the business of media. They don't know how to apply solid business principles. They're not going to be able to make a profit of any kind, and they're not going to be able to compensate people fairly or at a level where that their education would seem to justify. And that's a problem if you want people to stay in journalism, if you want to keep journalistic outlets alive. You cannot pretend to be virtuous and say, we don't care about the money, we just care about reporting the truth or caring about a particular social issue when your own journalists can't put food on the table or buy a home or even go on vacation with their family when they can't afford the basics. That's a problem. And if that is because the media business is not being run with good business principles, whether or not for profit business or a for-profit model, that is an issue. And that's something that I think that we're all going to have to pay attention to going forward if we want to keep media organizations and a diverse body of media organizations, many different media organizations, which I think is absolutely critical to having unbiased news. They're going to have to pay a lot more attention to the business side of things.
Right. I also want to give a shout out to John Kemper, who says in a live stream chat, it's called virtue signaling too, because again, you see these corporations, especially like these media outlets and Hollywood, anything that's kind of involved in media. You do hear them tout diversity, but it's usually not enough, and it's just there as just symbolism. It's nothing really substantial.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here at this right now looking at the audience, and I said before in the show, I want to see more people step up and get involved in media. And the thing is, here I'm going to use this example. Shout out not only to what we've done here at Hardlens Media, but shout out to the crew of the Convo Couch. Shout out to the crew of Revolutionary Blackout Network, who've had a very phenomenal week. Again, shout out to Nick, who was on the Hill earlier today, who just gave a 1-2 punch on the Hill, giving them a firm education. But there we go. I'll talk more about that for another live stream. But again, shout out to what we're doing. And again, that's what we're going to need to see. We're going to need to see people like Nick, people like Savvy Sabs, people like the Convo Couch, like the entire crew of the Mikasu Casa Network. We want to see more people step up. And that's where we're going to get the real diversity in media. Nothing attached to corporations.
Yeah. Well, in any case, there's an absolute need for business professionals in media at this time, and it's a different perspective than we normally hear. But I wanted to bring that to folks' attention because it is absolutely needed and necessary. It's not just about reporters and editors; it's also about those who can keep a company running in a way that makes sense. And that is also quite critical at this time. And this gentleman who wrote this article points out that he's not seeing that happening. And that's important. All right. I also wanted to move on, talking a little bit about. There's been several attempts recently to pass legislation that's supposed to be supporting local media, and there's been a couple of options that have been come out. There was one bill, I think it's now stalled again, that was supposed to provide tax credits to local media organizations who hire local reporters. It would give tax credits to businesses, small businesses that advertise in local media. Would give tax credit to those who subscribe to their local newspapers. That seems to be stalled. There has also been some attempts at trying to allow media organizations to negotiate with social media companies when social media companies use content and reap all the advertising dollars, but none of that actually goes back to the media organizations. That's a problem. That's kind of been stalled right now. Rand Paul now has decided that he knows what to do, and that is he's introducing a bill, which I think is absolutely insane, called the Local News and Broadcast Media Preservation Act, that is going to essentially allow media organizations to form monopolies to combat social media and tech companies.
Wow.
Which, okay, that is not. He thinks that by allowing disallowing the FCC from regulating, allowing local media organizations to buy each other up, Pac-Man style, turn into a monopoly, then they're going to have the ability to combat the big tech companies. I don't think it's going to work that way, and it is not going to necessarily in any way support support local media working the way it should. You don't want, for example, do you really want every media outlet in Chicago to be owned by the same company?
I think that's the world we're walking into, where it's all going to be owned
Yeah.
by one corporation. I mean, let's face it, Mickey Mouse, the dark overlord of the two moons, is doing everything he can. Sorry, again, I know it's a mascot, but Disney, the corporation that Mickey Mouse is attached to, well, they're buying up everything. They're buying up Marvel, Star Wars, etc. I mean, eventually everything's going to be owned by Disney. So I think until we see somebody actually take the initiative to really break apart these monopolies, that's the world we're going to. No, I don't want to see that happen. But it feels like that's the path we're being forced down to. And you could thank the Clintons for that, folks. The Telecom Act. You could thank the Clinton administration for that crisis that we're in.
This is just, I don't think it's going to pass, but it's one of the most remarkably boneheaded things that I've ever seen. It shows that Rand Paul clearly has no idea. And I mean, I'm not super anti Rand Paul, but that local media is at its best when it is relatively small, and when you have a situation when you have an environment in which independent sources can flourish and have their own organizations, because that's what's going to keep the local officials, for example, honest.
Agreed.
And when you've got multiple organizations, and so you don't have one organization that's cozy up with City Hall, you have another organization that's not cozy up with Citizen Hall, that's going to maintain accountability. And allowing everybody, TVs and radio stations and newspapers, to all be owned by the same people simply so they can fight big tech is not the solution to this. But this is who we have in our legislature.